Hey folks, this is Keith Brown. I'm a cartoonist, the creator of the Wages of Sin comic strip, and you're listening to Mr. Media.
I can't remember how I first came in contact with Missouri cartoonist Keith Brown, but I'm pretty sure Facebook or Twitter was involved. Keith is the creator of a short-lived, self-syndicated daily comic strip called The Wages of Sin. The funny thing is, the strip, which takes place in the bowels of red-hot hell, got funnier and funnier in its final year as Keith's frustrations with President Donald Trump boiled over and he let loose in the cartoon panels of sin. And sometime since the 666th and final strip appeared, Keith's view of Trump's indiscretions, lunacy, and general bad behavior have been revealed to be more on target than ever before. Since our paths first crossed online, I have gone from frequently sharing his more political strips on social media to publishing them via Mr. Media Books. And you can now own a little bit of Keith yourself by ordering The Wages of Sin, Volume 4, available in full color from Amazon.com. I fully expect The Wages of Sin will have a glorious afterlife. In addition to being a cartoonist, Keith is also a children's author, and earlier this year published It's an Extra Spooky, Creepy, Heebie-Jeebie Halloween. Keith Brown, welcome to Mr. Media.
Well, hello, Bob. That was a wonderful introduction. Sound like my check cleared.
Well, I'll leave you wondering about that a little bit longer. I imagine being here today that it's a little bittersweet to be talking about The Wages of Sin. It seemed like the longer it went on, though, the sharper your political bite became.
Well, that's true, Bob, and it's interesting because that's one of the reasons why I ended up retiring it, because I became such a broken record, and I couldn't get myself out of that. And trust me, there's a lot of material out there these days, but a lot of it ends up kind of being the same thing. We all kind of, if we have a cynical view of what's going on these days, a lot of times it kind of ends up just becoming the same things. And a lot of times there's only so many ways you can make fun of the same thing over and over again. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided that this particular incarnation had run its course. I thought there was about only so much I could do with it. Now, looking back, oddly enough, sometimes I think, wow, there was a lot of material left to do. But to be honest, I'm not sure if I could have done it any better than what the slate of current political cartoonists are doing. So I just decided to shelve it for a while. And, we say never say never. And although I technically retired it, I can't say that it'll never come back. It's just that at this point in time, I really don't have anything planned.
Well, tell folks a little about it. I kind of generalized by saying that it takes place in the bowels of hell, but that doesn't really do it justice. So explain it a little bit for folks who've never seen the strip.
Well, the thing is, I had never intended on actually starting a cartoon strip. If you'd like me to go back a few years,
sure.
I've always been interested in drawing and art and things like that. And I was okay. And even the few years that I was actually in college, I was going to study for commercial art. Then I came home one summer and went to work and never made it back. It's an age-old story. And but in my day-to-day work, where I work in the engineering department of a local machine tool manufacturer and do a lot of design work, so I was able to – a lot of my creative needs were kind of met in that position. So – but many years ago, probably, now that I think about it, probably 30 years ago, I had an idea for a cartoon strip that I don't know, I probably did up a half a dozen or a dozen samples. I called it Gullible's Travels. But it was two boys and a talking dog. How many times has that been done? And so I just toyed with the idea, and I set it aside. Never really did anything toward that end again. Now, over the years, I'd done some graphic design, some T-shirt design, some stuff on the side, but I hadn't really got back into cartooning per se. And then about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, we had some local political shenanigans going on here in my hometown, as every place does. And for some reason, I just had an idea for a cartoon, and I sketched something up, and I sent it in to the publisher of the local newspaper, and he loved it, but he wouldn't run it. Because he didn't want it. It's a very small town. I live right smack dab in the middle of Missouri, and literally in the middle of cornfields and bean fields, and small town of about 12,000 people. And he didn't want to ruffle any feathers with any of the business owners because they advertise, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. And he was a very nice guy. He liked it, but he just didn't want to make any waves. She was the mayor at the time.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay, that's fair enough. But it kind of spurred my interest. I was like, well, that was kind of fun, you know? So I put together, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 samples of some just garden variety single panel ideas. I had nothing earth shattering by any stretch, but just for the heck of it, I sent it to the editor of a newspaper in a considerably larger town about 30 miles south of us. And they had 30, 40,000 in that town. I forgot what the circulation of the paper is, but I emailed them to that editor, and lo and behold, I get an email back, and he's like, "Hey, how would you like to be our Sunday editorial cartoonist?"
Wow.
And so I just nonchalantly emailed back, "Sure, okay." And about that time, my wife pulls up, and then it dawned on me, I kind of walked outside, and I'm like, what have I done? But I ended up doing that for about a year, and it was, as a matter of fact, the gentleman's name was Bob Satin, and he's no longer the editor there. He took a teaching job at in the school system. But Bob gave me a wonderful opportunity, and I did a weekly for them for about a year, and it was a great experience, and it really helped me hone not only my drawing chops, but I guess my writing chops, and then, composing ideas and things of the sort. Although I say that, I look back at them now. At most of the things I look back at, I just cringe, the feeling. And I did those for about a year, a little more than a year, and then, much like what happened with Wages, after a while, even though it's a much larger town than what I live in, there's still a fairly small community. So a lot of the same topics go round and round. And it's difficult, at least it was for me, to constantly lampoon these topics without just coming off completely mean-spirited. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wanted them to be I wanted them to be topical and humorous or whatever, but it was difficult for me. And plus, I didn't live in the town, so I didn't really have a pulse on the community other than what just I read on the paper. So I was rather insulated. But after a while, after about a year or so, I was doing that, and I, finally said, that's great, but I want to move on. But where the cartoon strip came in, I was also working on some single panel ideas and stuff, and working on some other ideas for stuff. And there's a cartoon creator's website called the Cartoonist Studio, and I'm not sure if you were ever familiar with that site or not.
I don't think I am.
But it had started. That site had started up, and I was following it, and they had a contest. So I entered a dozen or so single panel tunes, but I still had a lot of time left. And you could enter as many things as you want. And I was thinking, well, I wonder if I could enter something else. And I happened to be leafing through some of my old editorials that I'd done for this paper. And I had done this very hackneyed, it was hack. It was hack big time. I mean, you look up hack, that cartoon's there. But it was something about a heat wave. I don't even remember. But I'd done a devil character and his assistant, and devil saying something about they're violating copyright. Get a hold of my lawyer. I'm paraphrasing, and the assistant says, "Can you be more specific?" You got a lot of lawyers down here, something to that effect. that cartoon itself, it was, I guess it was cute for a little bit, and I don't even remember if it was regarding a certain topic, but in flipping through there, and it's weird because I haven't had it, I've been searching for this ever since. Right in that moment, the entire thing just went boom. The entire premise, the entire everything that ended up being 666 different strips was born in that. I looked at that and I said, there's an idea. A cartoon strip in hell with the devil and his assistants, which I don't know that I was necessarily breaking. You know, devils have been used in cartoons before.
Right.
And there's probably been others that have been kind of that vein, but that's where the idea for that came from. It came from looking back at an old editorial that I had done. So in doing that, I started putting together some ideas, and I guess I put together about 12 strip ideas, and I entered all this stuff in the contest. And, single panel stuff, I was knocked out halfway through, but the original Wages stuff made it up to, I think, almost the last couple weeks of the contest. And I think it was a 10-week contest all told, and, readers would vote and stuff. And so it was a pretty good showing, considering all the stuff that was entered for its maiden voyage, I thought. So I think a lot of people kind of liked the concept. So I was like, well, okay, that's good. But I didn't really have any plans past that. And so I kind of went on my merry way, just floundering around for a couple of years doing single panels and stuff like that, submitting to different publications and the rejection. You know the whole story. Every cartoonist has it. And, excuse me, I don't think the second year, I can't remember if I entered the contest, to be honest with you. It's been some years back. But the third year, when it came around, or was getting ready to come around, I decided, you know what, I have nothing else going on. I can't seem to get anything rolling on anything. So I'm going to take this concept, and I'm going to make a concerted effort to turn this into something. Mm-hmm. So I started working on it, and I started, I say character development. It's interesting. I guess, if I go back and look at the very first stuff, the character design changed dramatically, I guess, as it should over time, to where it is now. And I look at it now and I'm pretty happy with it. When I first started drawing it, I guess I was happy with it, but when I look at it now, I'm like, ugh, But anyway, I made a concerted effort on that third year, and I put together some stuff, and lo and behold, that year I won the strip category. And as a matter of fact, there were two winners that year. There was a single panel winner and a strip winner, and a talented young man named Tyson Cole won the single panel category, and I won the comic strip category, which was pretty cool, And and I was supposed to win something, a book, and blah blah blah. And then summarily, immediately after that, the website went defunct, and I'm like, well, there we go. That's just that. But, excuse me, at that point, I had already kind of invested myself, and I was like, well, let's just keep this thing rolling. And that's what I did. And also, too, I guess I should point out, not that it matters, that at the time when Wages was active, it wasn't really a daily in so much as it ended up being about every other day. Not that anybody's keeping score, but that's about what I was able to pull off. And so I just kept doing it. And, once upon a time, there's I put out about 3 different collections over time. The first 3 are not actually in print right now, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be at a later date. And then you and I collaborated on coming up with the final installment of the Wages collection, which is just over 180 cartoons, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's a nice little book. It's a good little, if people, enjoy that, or my kind of humor, whatever you want to call it. I think they would consider that a fun little book. And that's kind of how we ended up here, Bob. Well, and that's been about 6 or 7 years.
So Keith,
all told.
have you always been considered? I mean, did your friends, your family, did they consider you funny? Do they like your sense of humor, or are you?
I think they just think I'm a smartass, and they would be correct.
I was going to say I don't think they'd be wrong.
No, they're not. They wouldn't be wrong at all. Well, it's. I guess in a lot of ways. Well, let's go this way. I love stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan. As a matter of fact, for folks listening, the wonderful Rich Scheidner was kind enough to write the introduction for this book, which is a huge honor for me. And also, conversely, while we were talking about this, I just got done reading Rich's book, which is also available through Mr. Media Books, called Kicking Through the Ashes. Wonderful, wonderful book. If any folks listening really like the nuts and bolts of the entertainment and comedy industry, I find all that fascinating. But I guess I would consider myself, I never had the getting up in front of people and performing. I never had that drive to do something like that, but I really appreciate what stand-ups do. So in a way, I would say maybe I'm a frustrated stand-up. But if you read these, and you could probably note this, Bob, that I set them up, everything is pretty much set up, punchline. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was on purpose, because that's just kind of how my mind works when I'm coming up with a joke. But I was also pretty cognizant of the fact that a lot of these people are going to be reading these on their phones or mobile devices. And so I wanted to just come up with something that was short and sweet and pow, pow, pow. A lot of online comics you see today they're somewhat long form, and you're scrolling and stuff. And I didn't want to really do any long story narratives. So I just approached it like maybe how an old Borscht Belt comic would do stand-up gags. Mm-hmm. Set it up, punch it, set it up, punch it. And I guess it kind of worked well for the most part. Now, it's kind of, a lot of people, it's I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of middle ground on the people that like the strip. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. Of course, leave it to me to pick the absolute two worst topics to talk about, politics and religion. But the way I look at it is, why not? I mean, from the religious aspect, I mean, a lot of people weren't happy with that. Even in my own family, they were not happy with that. But I'm like, well, we have this drilled into our heads all our lives. And, I don't see any reason why we can't, I didn't see anything sacred about the devil. So that's kind of where it came from. And so I just kind of kept riding that wave and had a lot of fun with it too.
Do you have any trouble talking politics around your family? I'm sure you don't, do you?
You know what? We don't, basically.
Don't talk about it, or don't have trouble?
Not really. I am a lone, the weird thing is I don't even like labels. A lot of people would call me a flaming liberal or whatever. And I don't even know if that's true. Maybe it really boils down to the issue at hand. But I'd say in my daily life, I'm much more of a moderate when it comes to, politics and everything else, although I lean liberal when it comes to social issues. Mm-hmm. But ever since what's happened over the past couple of years, we generally don't talk about it. And one of the bugaboos about what's going on as of late, we're so far removed from normal conservatives and liberals. What's going on now is just wrong, and it has caused people, and not just my family. I'm speaking generally, your friends or whatever. And I think a lot of people feel this way when people that you feel help a lifetime to shape you into a compassionate, caring, critical thinking adult, and it's usually the people we surround us with. And then all of a sudden you see them buying in to what's going on with this current president, and it completely throws everything you've ever known for a loop, in my opinion. And it's kind of like you just don't understand how they got there. We can disagree politically. That's pretty common. But it can be very difficult sometimes to understand how folks can buy into all that, because what's going on now is not even remotely normal. And I think we will, we'll come out of the other side okay. I think this has been a good experience for the country going, it does matter who we elect. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, though, honestly, Bob, they knew that going in, but they thought, what the heck? And I can actually, I have a lot of respect for anybody that could say, I voted for the guy because I thought X, Y, Z, but didn't work out that way, and blah. I'm completely fine with that. But the people who continually to keep blinders on in the face of what is known and what's going on, and they refuse to accept that reality, that I don't get it. Mm-hmm. I absolutely don't get it. And this is, so I don't know. So what I found is it's basically best. I mean, my cartoons kind of reflected my sentiment. So I don't really have a lot of discussions, so much in the family. We just kind of stay away from that, just so we don't get we're like a lot of other families. This is it's a big thing for a lot of people right now, because it is very divisive, and I think he's purposely divisive, and that's the one thing he's very good at. And so I generally try to avoid it, because I'm probably the lone in my immediate circles, and so we just kind of let it go.
What makes the president of the United States funny, and is this president any funnier in terms of his behavior and such than any other president?
There's plenty of stuff to make fun of, Bob. I mean, a lot of the stuff writes itself. But actually, there's really nothing funny about this guy. There's things to make fun of, but honestly, I would much rather have a competent adult in that position, more so than I'd want any sort of material that I could mine. From that. And there's plenty of things to make fun of, and I've done it, and a lot of people are still doing it. A lot of times, sometimes it's almost difficult. The man is a living cartoon character, so it in a ways, it's one of the reasons why I kind of backed off for a while. It's just like, okay, I've pretty much said everything I got to say about this guy and the situation, but the problem is I couldn't break that mindset, and it was actually becoming boring to me, to be honest with you. So I thought, let's just take a step back for a while here, and we'll let other folks do it. And but I'm not saying, I'm not saying I'll never be back at it again with the wages. And if the muse strikes again, I'd certainly like to come out with something else. But right now, it's difficult for me to leave that mindset. And being in that mindset, I'm not sure that there's anything at this period very unique about that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to just force it, I thought, well, maybe this has ran its course. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of retired it and just took a break for a while. And I'm hoping the muse will strike again. But, it's interesting. That's a very interesting question. There's a lot of funny things to make fun of, but there's absolutely nothing funny about what's going on.
Well, and I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Without the strip to channel your frustrations these days, how do you express yourself in this day and age?
Well, believe it or not, here's the weird thing, and I have not since I retired this strip, I managed to get myself to think comedically and just look at something and go, I have not had an idea that I would consider cartoon worthy since. But I'm not too freaked out about that because, again, I just wanted to step back for a while and just kind of, I'm just trying to cleanse my palate, to be honest with you. So really what I'm doing is I'm not really thinking in those terms. I practice the banjo, but, here in Missouri, that's state law. They issue you one at birth. Mm-hmm. And actually that's not true. I just happen to enjoy it, but I like anything from bluegrass to Pink Floyd. So that's always been an interest of mine. So I've kind of been into that lately, driving my wife crazy, I might say. But the bug is still in there swimming around, but he just hasn't come up for air lately. And he'll be back. Well, I just don't know what form yet.
All right, but the answer to my question, I believe, was Twitter.
Oh. Why didn't you just say that?
Well, I asked you. How do you express yourself these days?
Okay. Well, I apologize, and I see what you're saying.
Where do you channel your frustration? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I do, and I post a lot of. It's interesting you mention it. I post them more on Twitter now because Facebook, a lot of it's been out there and has been seen, but. It is interesting that you mentioned that. How many of these strips that I might have drawn a year ago are still as relevant today as ever? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, you're correct. I'm glad you answered that question for me, Bob. Twitter. And I like to, if something, it's a lot of times what I do is I'll post one that I've already drawn that's relative to a topic or subject matter. The last 100 or so being political, mm-hmm. and but something will come up, and I'm going. I got a tune about that, and I've got one about that, even though it's the tune might be technically old, but the subject matter keeps rolling around again. So yes, Twitter. I am a admitted Twitter troll. I like to go onto Twitter, and I like to tell Donald Trump just what he can do,
and not just Trump.
That's not just Trump, but that's one of the greatest things about this country. Not just our country. A lot of countries you can do that, but, have the ability to do that. And I don't mince words on Twitter, and I've been called out for that. But, again, at this particular time in our history, I don't think coarse language, I don't think it's ever been more appropriate. But there you go.
All right. Well, one more thing before we let you go here. I also mentioned that you've produced a children's book.
I did.
Do you want to reassure moms and dads that it won't take the kiddies straight to hell?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And actually, and you did a wonderful intro, but the title is, in fact, it's an extra spooky, heebie-jeebie, creepy Halloween. And I actually wrote that title, oh my goodness, back in 99, I think. It was when I actually wrote it. Excuse me. And the original concept behind it was called It's an Ultra Spooky Heebie-Jeebie. And it was that title forever until the time I actually sat down to illustrate it and put it in page form. I got to reading it. I was like, ultra sounds cool, but how many kids are going to know what it means? Mm-hmm. And you don't want to have to explain it to them. Unfortunately, the word extra means basically the same amount of syllables, and it just works. I dropped it in there. But no, it's strictly for the kiddies. It's nothing to do with the wages strip or that sort of sense of humor or anything. It's strictly, well, as a matter of fact, Bob, it was originally written as a song. And I still hope to make it into a song someday. And excuse me. But it is strictly for the kiddies. It's a wonderful rhyming Halloween romp. It has some fun maze puzzles in the back. Now, that particular title, if you don't mind me saying,
sure,
Bob, is actually available through Golden Bell Studios. And if anybody's interested, they can go to my Facebook page. If you just type in on the search bar on Facebook either Keith Brown or The Wages of Sin, you'll end up on one of my pages. The children's book even has its own page, but it's very long to type in. It's an extra spooky, heebie-jeebie, creepy Halloween, but it's out there. But if anybody's interested and wants to go look that up at Golden Bell, it's under their Polar Press imprint, or they can get a hold of me specifically, and I'll be happy to show them some stuff or maybe to guide them where they'd like to go. But as to your original comment, no, it's completely separate from the wages. There's nothing remotely. It's fine for the kiddies. And if you have youngsters that are trick-or-treating age, it's perfect. The title is a reoccurring chorus, effectively, if you will. And it's kind of kids just love saying it when it comes back around. And it's been my experience thus far, watching kids with it. They absolutely love it. And now we're just in the process of trying to convince grown-ups of that, and trying to get it out and get the word out and get it. Golden Bell is actively seeking outlets for it right now, some maybe hopefully retail outlets or just whatever we can do. And as you know, Bob, sometimes it's a long road to hoe.
Sometimes it is.
Things out there, and that's kind of what we're working on right now. But I appreciate you mentioning that.
Sure. Well, folks, listen, you can order the fourth and final collection of my guest Keith Brown's daily comic strip, The Wages of Sin. That'd be volume 4 in bright, beautiful, full color at a great price at either mrmedia.com, that's mrmedia.com, or go straight to amazon.com and search The Wages of Sin and Keith Brown. It will come up. So, Keith, do you have a website, or do you want to send people to Twitter or Facebook?
Actually, I had a website once upon a time, but nobody ever came there. I was probably doing it wrong. If folks want to find me, they can go to Facebook, search bar, you can type in The Wages of Sin. You'll either find me or a band, and I don't think I'll be too hard to find. Or you can look for me on Twitter where am I at on Twitter? Let me get here.
Isn't it Sticks?
Yeah, I keep forgetting on Twitter you just have to give the laugh, right? But it's at Stix, STIXX 3969. And you can find me there, or if folks are listening, they know Bob's page. They can, probably find me through him too. But yeah, Stix 3969 or Facebook. And like I say, I have several different Facebook pages, but I'm not hard to find. And I love chatting with people if they like a tune, or even if they don't. Let me know. We'll talk about it.
And folks, by the time you see or hear this, there will be a page on mrmediabooks.com for Keith and his book, so you can always go there. So mrmediabooks.com, or look up Keith on Twitter or Facebook. And Keith Brown, thanks so much for joining us in Mr. Media today.
Bob, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks for letting me ramble. And more importantly, thank you for what you do. I enjoy your podcasts immensely. And, you put a lot of work into these, and I want you to know that I, for one, appreciate it. And I look forward to many more to come.
Thanks, Keith. And yes, the check did clear.
Okay. Yay.